All right. Surprise, surprise, we're still in James. We're getting to the end, though. This is chapter 5. 3 more weeks after this, and then we kick off in Matthew. Brace yourselves, because that's going to take like a really long time. But as I mentioned before, that's the Lord's will. So if he wants to commit our church to a long, long time in Matthew, then that's what we get to do. All right. So today's sermon is living our life for the one true treasure. Living your life for the one true treasure. So the question is, how do we live our lives in a world full of treasures and live our lives for Jesus, the one true treasure? That is a very difficult task indeed. And James addresses the dilemma for us in 2 ways in the passage that's before us, which is chapter 5 of James, verses 1 to 8. So if you've got your Bible with you, please turn to chapter 5 of James and we'll get started very soon. James addresses it in 2 ways. He gives us a very damning picture of the world 2,000 years ago in terms of consumerism, materialism, and excessive lifestyle. And he gives us... Vanessa just preached my sermon for me. There we go. Like, I don't have to do anything anymore. I can just like mic drop. Yep. Okay. So this is what I love about being a church. Everyone's heart is on fire for Jesus. They all think exactly the same way. It's awesome. So yeah. And so he gives us this warning. Don't be like this. But then he gives us an exhortation of how we're supposed to live our lives in a world that is so full of consumerism, materialism, and excessive living. And something that I learned when I was doing the reading for this passage that I wanted to share with you before I get right into the nuts and bolts of the passage. I found this quite striking. Of the 3 commentaries that I read on this passage, 2 of them went right into the historical context of James. And it was very eye-opening in terms of what a church looked like 2,000 years ago. And when I saw this, I thought to myself, wow, wouldn't that be great if churches would like that today? And what it was is that there was significant scholarship to suggest that James did not write a letter to Christians alone, that James wrote a letter to Christians and non-Christians. He didn't do a Paul and try and correct the ways of a Christian congregation. He was writing to a congregation with the expectation that there would be both non-Christians and Christians in the room. So the context of what we looked at last week, when we were looking at about how we should live our lives and not boasting forward and making our own plans, our own directions in life, leading now into this verse where he goes pretty hard on consumerism, materialism, and excessive living. The originally intended audience would have been wealthy people sitting in the room who did not know Jesus. That was the original audience context. And when I read that, I thought to myself, you know, as a church that we are, that believes that we are not a building, but the followers of Jesus Christ, you know, that we're gathering in his name, worshiping him, listening to his word, you know, trying to live our lives as if he's walking right beside us. As we're trying to plant this church, James is telling us that the church that we plant should not be just for Christians. It should be a church where we bring non-Christians as word, that they should also come into the congregation and hear the word. And the vision that's been set before us, and I'll be talking about this a lot more in the coming weeks, because there's a couple of sermons that really highlighted this, but I know that many members of our congregation have already had visions of a church in an open area environment. And God willing, if that comes to fruition, we, the church, the people of God gathering in his name to worship him and to hear his word are going to be doing so before non-Christians walking their dog, taking their kids to a playground, doing whatever they want to do on a vast, gigantic oval. And God willing, they would come and sit down with us and listen to the word of God, just as non-Christians did when they heard James's letter read in its original context. I wanted to share that with you because it was just a powerful insight into the way the church was and ideally how the church should be today as well. Okay. So let's kick off this warning that James has for us. So in James chapter 5, verses 1 to 6. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries which are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments have become moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver have rusted, and their rust will be witness against you and will consume your flesh like fire. It is in the last days that you have stored up your treasure. Behold, the pay of the laborers who mowed your fields and which you have been withheld by you cries out against you, and the outcry of those who did the harvest has reached the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. You have lived luxuriously on the earth and led a life of wanton pleasure. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and put to death the righteous man. He does not resist you. Now that's some pretty tough language. And knowing humans, you would imagine sadly that a lot of the people in the back of that room who would have heard that, their hearts would have been so hardened that they would have opened them up to hear what James had to say. But we have to be sure that we don't make the same mistake. Because we cannot kid ourselves to think that just because 2,000 years ago James was directing these words at non-Christian people living in excessiveness and consumerism and materialism, that we somehow get a free pass today, 2,000 years later, because it's just not true. These words apply equally to us now as they did to the intended audience 2,000 years ago. Now, 2,000 years ago, there were three key ways that one could display their wealth. And I would say it was probably much easier to distinguish wealth from poverty 2,000 years ago than it is today. You see, 2,000 years ago, you could do it by excessive lifestyle, excessive appearance, or excessive living. So, excessive appearance was quite easy. They would wear their wealth openly. Rich fabrics, jewels, gems. They would wear it right before everybody. It's like peacocking. Look at me. Look at my wealth. Okay? There would be excessive living. You know, breaking bread and stew wouldn't be enough. Let's get a fattened calf and slaughter it. Let's get the wine out, the kegs. Let's just not have a bottle. Let's get all the kegs out. Let's get the fruit platters out. Let's have massive banquets. Let's just go nuts with our wealth. That was excessive living. And then there was excessive lifestyle, because when you've got money and you've got lots of it, you got to spend it, right? So you just spend it on gambling, you spend it on partying, you spend it on frivolity. You know, you wouldn't just get the bare minimum house or the bare minimum, furnishings. Let's take it up a couple of notches. They were the easy ways for people to display their wealth, display their materialism, and display their consumerism 2,000 years ago. And not much has changed, except that is much more blurred now than it was 2,000 years ago. And this is why I said we are kidding ourselves if we honestly don't believe that this passage is speaking to us now as just as it was 2,000 years ago to its intended audience. Because the world we live in is so filled with consumerism and materialism and excessiveness that it's very easy for a Christian to get lost in it and lose sight of the one true treasure walking beside them, and to be taken in by all the treasures that their eyes can see. So as Christians, we live our lives the way that James is telling us not to live in these first 6 chapters in 2 ways, actively and passively. Okay? Actively, passively. So actively looks at how we spend our money and how we have to spend our money. Okay? Now, let's go with the second one, because it's the more difficult one, the how we have to spend our money. Okay? Some countries in the world, people live and they don't have water at the turn of a tap. They don't have electricity. Okay? They're going to walk 7, 8 kilometers with a bucket on their head to go down to a water source, which might not even be what we would even deem to be potable in Western society, but that's the best they've got, so they'll drink it. You know, their village is made of all the material that they could gather up around them. You know, the trees, the fallen trees, all that sort of thing. Okay? They don't have things like insurance. They don't have electricity bills. They don't have rates bills. They don't have water bills. You know, they don't have mortgages. They don't have all of these extra expenditures that we have in our life. And this is the spend our money on the things we have to that I'm referring to. Where it gets very blurred for us as Christians living in a materialistic, consumered, excessive culture is that we look at these things in our lives and we go, well, we have to have, you know, a phone. We have to have some form of device that we can do our email on, you know, that we can type messages on. We'll look things up on the internet. We have to have a car in order to be able to drive to the shops and, you know, go to work. I have to have a roof over my head of some sort, you know, a bed that I have to sleep on. You know, there's all these things that we have to spend our money on that we wouldn't necessarily have to in a more impoverished environment. You know, in a first world country, there's all these have-tos. And the trapping here for Christians is how we spend our money on our necessities. Are we spending the bare minimum, or are we going up a couple of notches? And that's one of the ways that Christians actively get into trouble, the same way as they do in this verse. Because suddenly it's not just a bare minimum phone. Suddenly I want an iPhone. I want a branded phone. I want a phone that's got 3 cameras on the back and not 1, because, hey, better, right? You know, I don't want just 4G. I want 5G. I want faster, because faster's better. You know, I don't just want a car. I want a brand new car. I want a car that's European made. I want a car with awesome safety ratings. I don't just want a house. I want a house that's got more rooms, that's got more land, that's actually got a fence and a bit of space between me and my neighbors. Suddenly, it's very easy for us as Christians to take that which God has blessed us with, our money, our finances, and then just slowly but surely take it up an extra notch in various aspects of our lives. And each extra notch slowly takes away that which God has blessed us with, that which he wants us to steward, that which is what he wants us to use in a particular way. And it just evaporates before our eyes. But then there's also the other way of actively doing it is how we actually directly spend our money. Not just the slightly taking it up a notch, but hitting those 3 points of excessive living, excessive lifestyle, and excessive appearance. That 2,000 years ago was exactly how people displayed their wealth. Food. I'm guilty of this. I could just as easily make myself a sandwich and take it to work, but I go get Subway. There's extra couple of bucks gone every week. Go to a restaurant. They'll just take your money. Seriously. Like, you ever look at the beverage menu? It's like $7 for a soft drink. Don't even get to the alcohol section. $7. I go down to the server, I can get one for like half that price. I actually walk into the Woolies myself, I can get a 12-pack. You know, it was like cheapy stuff. For that price, I can even just get water for free, right? Like, it just, like, this is just so easy to get trapped into just actively spending our money. Just gone, you know, on just excessiveness that's not necessary. You know, the same goes for possessions. You know, we hit on this before, you know, the car, the house, but it can even be just something like your doona. You know, oh, I don't want 250 for a count, I want 1,000 for a count. Let's take that up a notch. Okay? You know, I don't want, you know, this particular soap product. I want this particular soap product. There goes an extra few dollars on the soap product. It's just so easy to take everything up an extra notch. And then there's our hobbies. This is one of the ones that this passage really convicted me this week. This was a difficult sermon. It's hard to preach a sermon when the guy walking beside you is like, just like passing, perusing, like your whole entire, everywhere you walk. It's like, okay, I get it. It's tough. This is a tough passage. This is a difficult passage, but it's a passage that we need. It's a passage that I needed, that's for sure. Hobbies. Now, it's easy to have like a workshop in wood or sewing machines in like fabric. You know, you got your little patterns and patterns and everything. Okay, patterns and everything. Okay, just for anyone who's listening, that's my mother-in-law. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, so, but it's easy to take that extra up a notch. Okay, so there's one way you can do it, and you take your plan and you build your furniture or something, and then you sell it, we use it. Okay, but then there's the taking it up a notch level, which is going to the dump. Wow, look at all that wood. I could use that one day. It's only $10 here, not $10 there. I'll use it one day for sure. Just accumulate it and accumulate it. And then you got like masses of wood. It's like plan after plan. This is just like, the money's gone. It's not like you can go back to them and say, can you take my wood back, please? No, that's it. It's gone, disappeared. Fabric, $5 here, $5 there, magazine there. I'll use it one day. That'll be fine. My mother did this. Ironically, my mother-in-law and my mother did this. but my mother would have an area about 1/3 the size of this room that we're in right now. It'd be like 7, 8 crates of like fabric and like ribbons and buttons. And we'd just be run row. It'd be like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll use it one day. It'll catch fire one day. But it's so easy to take something which could be just a simple hobby, make one quilt, put it on my bed, you know, I'm saving money, I'm using it, to I'm going to display all my quilts. Or I'm going to have all this stuff that I'm going to one day get around to or do. And suddenly money is just disappearing all the time. This is just another example of how we can actively, as Christians, just make the money just disappear. What about passively? Passively is where it gets much, much more difficult. So passively is the items that we spend our money on and the injustices behind their creation. In other words, this is the thing behind what you spent your money on, the stuff that you're not aware about, the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that we sometimes either turn a blind eye to or rather wish we didn't know. But believe me, God is very well aware of the injustices that go behind many of the things that we take for granted in life and purchase. And as it says here in verse 4, behold, the pay of the laborers who mowed your fields and which have been withheld by you cries out against you. The outcry of those who did the harvesting has reached the ears of the Lord Sabaoth. God is very well aware of all the injustices of man that are involved in consumerism and materialism and the excessive living that is before us, that our eyes just see all the time. He is very well aware of it. And I can tell you from this passage, he's clearly not happy about it. And we shouldn't be happy about it either. I don't buy clothing that's made in Bangladesh. And there's a reason for that, okay? And the reason actually 18 months ago got even more of a good reason, sadly. The initial reason why I stopped doing it is because I was once told that the cotton that Bangladesh imports comes from a West Asian country who let their kids out at lunchtime from school, and instead of teaching them and educating them, sends them out into the cotton fields, pays them no money, and they harvest the cotton. That's why Bangladesh gets its cotton so cheap, because it's sourced from next to no labor cost. And then that cotton is used to make the clothing. But then it gets worse. You might remember about 18 months, 2 years ago, a factory collapsed in Bangladesh, killing all its workers. So not only was the cheap item of clothing cheap because the cotton was harvested by children who should have been getting educated, and instead got harvested with no pay, it was made it was probably made in some kind of derelict and factory that wasn't even maintained properly because they were cutting costs so much. And here's people, the very people that Jesus is telling us we're supposed to reach and say, the very people who are outcrying to God about injustices, and they're just trying to put food on the table for ridiculously low wages. They're just doing whatever they can to survive. And they're thinking, this building's fine, right? Like, it's not going to collapse on me. And then suddenly it collapses on them. This is just one example. And you could find millions of examples in the world, if you looked closely enough, of injustices that go on behind the scenes of the very items that you purchase. The very items, the food you eat, the things that you wear. It's just ridiculous. We're just passively feeding into this just as badly as we are actively doing so. So, like I said at the beginning, James gives us a warning about what not to do, which we just covered. He gives us the warning to Christians about excessive living, excessive lifestyle, excessive appearance, and how we actively and passively can be involved in this. Now comes the exhortation to Christians, the exhortation on how they're supposed to live their lives in a world so rampant with consumerism and excessiveness and materialism. So here it comes. Verse 7. Therefore be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil, being patient about it until he gets the early and late rains. You too be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Now, one of the things that we looked at a lot recently in James is the idea of what we value, what we believe about Jesus should be shown in our attitudes and our behaviors towards others. And one of the truths about a value, belief, attitude, behavior system is that if you have competing values, you will have contradictory behaviors. I'm going to repeat that. If you have competing values, you will have contradictory behaviors. So here is an example. I value Jesus in my life. I value my Lord and Savior. I believe that he died on the cross for me for the forgiveness of my sins so that I can spend eternity with God, so I can be made perfect in the eyes of God. Now, hopefully, as Christians, we would assign a very large number to those values and beliefs. Let's go for 10 out of 10, okay? We're not going to go 11 out of 10. That's ridiculous. Let's just go to max number, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, okay? But then what happens if we have the taking it up a notch value? What if we have the, I want to have things in my house that are nice? What if we have the way I want to live my life in a nice, comfortable fashion? You know, I don't want to be doing it tough. I want to be doing it easy. You know, I want to be able to, you know, enjoy my life in comfort, which incidentally, you won't find in your New Testament anywhere. You're not going to find comfort as like how we live our lives as Christians. You can find the exact opposite. Okay. But for this, let's just say we give that a 7.8. And then we come over here to attitudes and behaviors. So Jesus teaches us that we're supposed to look after orphans. We're supposed to give to widows in need. He says to us that the person that you're supposed to feed people, clothe people, and give them water. And the people that you didn't feed, clothe, and give water to, you didn't do to me. Okay? There is a clear and distinct message from Jesus of live as I did and live as I say. Live it out in your life. Okay? I helped orphans in need. I helped widows in need. I gave people water. I sacrificed my life on the cross so they can be made perfect in the eyes of God, something that nobody can do on their own. Only Jesus can do that. We're supposed to live that out in our lives. But because we've got this competing value, we have contradictory behaviors. So instead of using our money and stewarding it well, giving to orphans, helping widows, giving people food that need food, clothe people who need clothing, giving water, people who need water, instead, we have taken it up a notch. I don't just need a basic phone to get by in life. I need a phone with 3 cameras on it. I don't just need a car. I need a car with these trimmings on it. You know, I need a car with massive safety rating. I just need a roof over my head. I need a massive house, you know, and a nice area, you know. We get contradictory behaviors because we have competing values. And this is foundational to Jesus' warning in the Beatitudes about the fact that we cannot serve 2 masters. You cannot serve both wealth and God. They both can't have values assigned to them that are high. Okay? You can't have Jesus at a 10 and then wealth just second behind. Or worse still, comfort at a 10 and Jesus isn't at a 10, okay? Jesus should always be at a 10, but sadly there is a reality that there are people who live with Jesus not at a 10, okay? And they put other things above Jesus, all right? So the ideal is Jesus is at a 10, and then comfort would be 1 or 0, okay? Because the New Testament is very clear we're going to get persecuted for our beliefs. It's very clear that people gave up their fishing boats and left everything to go follow Jesus because that's how important Jesus was. So what this passage is challenging us is you need to get right at the foundational values and the numbers that you assign to them within yourself. Jesus has to be a 10. How you spend your money and comfort, drop it way low. Get it as low as you can possibly get it. Because if you do that, it'll flow on into your attitudes and behaviors about how you steward your finances and how you manage that which God has blessed you with in the lives of others instead of spending it in the lives of yourself. You will no longer have contradictory behaviors. You will actually be living it out the way that Jesus intends us to. And in a world full of other treasures that take our eyes, that make it so easy for us to raise the value of comfort up that little extra notch higher, it is important, as James says, to be mindful of the coming of the Lord. In other words, be mindful of the fact that there is only one true treasure. Jesus. Okay? Jesus is the one true treasure. And as I alluded to before, he makes us perfect in the eyes of God, something that we cannot do on our own. Okay? No matter how hard we try, we will continually do the things that we know that we shouldn't, and we will continually not do the things that we know that we should. It is impossible for a human to live its life any other way. That's just how humans act. And this is the reason why we all need Jesus, the one true treasure. Because by having a relationship with him, a maintained relationship with Jesus Christ, we are made perfect in the eyes of God. That is a treasure so great that in many parables in your New Testament, it clearly says that people will sell everything and buy a field that's got that treasure in it just to get the treasure. That's how important it is. They will give up everything to get that one treasure because there's nothing you can do. There's no amount of money you can spend. There's no change that you can make in your values or your beliefs or your attitudes or your behaviors that you can make on your own that will make you clean in the eyes of God. Only the loving sacrifice of Jesus Christ and giving your life to him in relationship with him for the rest of your life, a true and maintained relationship, that will make you perfect in the eyes of God. That is the one true treasure. That is the one true treasure that we should be living out our lives as Christians. Which brings us to the two ways that we can do this in our lives. So it actually has some application for us. Because there's one thing to be able to say that the world is broken. There's one thing to say that it's difficult to live our lives in a world that is broken like that. But there are ways that we can do it. So how do we keep our focus on the one true treasure? Well, I've touched on this a couple of times already. Mindfulness, okay? It's amazing what happens when you focus your mind on the idea that Jesus Christ is walking beside me every single moment of the day. You will suddenly catch yourself doing things that you might not have caught yourself doing before. It's almost as if he's right there because he actually is watching everything you do. He's there with you the whole entire time. You can talk to him at any time. He's worship him at any time. Pray with him at any time. He's there the whole entire time. You're walking with him. It's a journey along a path of righteousness. It's a walk. It's a journey. We have to be mindful of that. So bringing Jesus into our mind, bringing him into our space, being aware of his presence constantly helps us to change the way that we spend our money. It helps us when we're living in a world full of alternate treasures, different things that catch our eye, that are shiny, different ways of taking it up a notch. Because if we're mindful of the fact that we're walking next to Jesus, all of a sudden it's very easy to say, should I get this? Do I really need this? Is this good for me? Is this a good way for me to spend my money? Suddenly we're praying a lot more to him. We're looking for guidance from him a lot more. We're seeking his knowledge a lot more in how we should live our lives and how we should steward that which he has blessed us with. And the second one, which I've already alluded to, is to focus on him, to focus on his ways, to focus on his word, to live our lives for him and the journey with him each and every day. That is the only way to keep ourselves safe in a world that's becoming increasingly more consumeristic, increasingly more material, and increasingly more excessive. In a world where it's so easy to just spend an extra $10 on another streaming service, or take your phone plan up an extra notch to get some more data, or to get an extra camera on the back of your phone. It's just so easy. The excessiveness is just rife. And it's so easy for Christians to get trapped by it. And that is why it's so important that we keep our focus on him and be mindful of him at all times, because he will keep us safe away from that. He will help us to make better choices with that which he has stewarded us with. So I have 3 questions for everybody, including myself. 3 questions to ask yourselves as you leave here today. 3 questions to ponder as you go about your week. And the first one is this: where is there excess in your life? Where is there money being spent on the necessities that doesn't have to be spent quite to the degree that it is? Can you take your phone plan down a notch? Does the phone have to have 3 cameras? Is there some way that you can spend less on the things that in a Western society we need? That are essentially, when we talk to ourselves as being essentials, is there ways that we can spend less on those? Is there anything that I look around my house, I think to myself, yes, it's depreciated. Yes, its value is not that which it used to be. The very thing that James tells us happens to that which we own. But is there stuff I can sell? Is there some way I can get value back out of this thing, this object, this something I spent money on that maybe I'm convinced in my heart now that I probably shouldn't have done? So some way I can get some value back out of that and use that for Jesus' kingdom. Well, if I can't sell it myself and get value, could it be used by somebody who is less fortunate than myself? Could I donate it? Could I find somebody who could use it, who could need it, and it would make their life better? And this is something that I've been doing actively this week. Like I said, this is not an easy passage. It's a difficult passage. It's one that's convicted me as I've been preparing this sermon. It's one that hopefully is convicting each and every one of you as well, because it's a message that as Christians we always need to hear. We always need to bring ourselves back to the one true treasure and take our eyes off all the treasures that are around us. The second question is, do I need to be more generous in my life? Who can I be more generous with? He says here in this passage, behold the pay of the laborers who mowed your fields. Maybe you need to tip more. Maybe, you need to be more generous with someone who helps you out in your life, helps you with your gardening, helps you with your cleaning. Maybe you need to give them a little bit extra. Is there some way that we can't all be the person who goes out to the mission field, and we can't always be the person who, does the hands-on work. Is there some way that you can take what God stewards you from your profession and give it to a charity or give it to some people who actually do this work of feeding people and clothing people and giving them water? There's so many missions. One comes to mind is the Children's Hunger Fund. It will astound you to know that over 99% of all money they receive not only goes to clothing, feeding, giving water to those who need it in countries where they just don't live the way that we do, but they also share the gospel to those people as well. So not only are you getting a great return on your stewardship of your money to an organization like that, because they're not wasting on organizational costs, you're helping spread the word, and you're also helping people get what they need to survive. And the third question is, do I need to change my lifestyle? Have my hobbies become excessive? Am I spending too much time and too much money on forward planning for them instead of actually just using what I've already got, using it up? Are there ways that I need to change out the places that I hang out with my friends, the people that I spend time with? Am I going to restaurants that are too expensive? Can I downsize that, save some money? Can we just go have a picnic at the beach instead? Pack lunch? Is there ways that we can drop off the taking it up a notch in our lives and how we live out our lives with those around us? So the 3 questions that I think we all need to ponder, and I know I will be in the coming week, is where is there excess in your life? Do I need to change my lifestyle? And do I need to be more generous? And as we address these three questions in our lives, we have to remember that we are walking the path of righteousness with the one true treasure, Jesus. He is the reason we are still here. He is the reason why we're still on this earth. It is for him that we live. It is for him that he has blessed us with what we have. It is for him that we steward what we have for those that he needs to give it to. Those people in need, the people that he puts in our lives to help. He is the one that we need to be mindful of. He is the one we need to focus our life on. He is the one that we need to turn to when we ask ourselves those three questions. Where is there excess? Do I need to change my lifestyle? Do I need to be more generous? Because he is the one who has the answer to all three of those questions on how he wants you to live your life moving forward.